Coogs House. All right. Finished kind of like a dominant win, but it certainly went that way start to finish. The Houston Cougars knock off Tulane. Let's break down what happened, who starred, and what else happened in college basketball. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan, you're going to stop by, please be sure to hit subscribe down below. That way you get the latest on the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day, all year long. We like to talk to you each and every day here on YouTube, so welcome back to the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe. We're up over 430 subscribers last I saw. We're getting close to 440. Remember, we get to 500, giving another giveaway. Thanks for our buddies back here at Sparkle. The 250 went great. 500 is going to go even better, and we're looking forward to get to 1,000 again. We're trying to get 1,000 before March Madness. If that happens, we'll do something very, very big, I promise. If you can't even say in the comments below after talking, but you still want to be entered in the contest, obviously, tell us if you'd rather watch like a 2.5-hour movie or 2.5 hours of binge watching episodes on Netflix. All right, so today's going to be all about recapping the Tulane game from last night. An exciting game, I think more exciting than we realized, but also a comfortable win by the end. Houston does win 80-60, but it did not feel like a 20-point win throughout. So we're going to break that down in the first segment. The second segment, we got to talk about Marcus Sasser. He had one of those nights where it's like very clear he's a pro, and he may be moving up the draft charts as we speak. Third segment, kind of look at this win, kind of in relation to a lot of crazy stuff happening in college basketball, because it was one of those nights in college basketball, especially in our future conference, Big 12, where things just continue to happen. But in this first segment, let's break down the game. Stars or honorable mention kind of stuff goes out to all 5 stars for Houston. Jarace Walker had just 6 points, which surprised me when I checked the box score. I feel like he had more of an impact on that end of the floor. But he did have 2 assists and 9 rebounds. That may be what I'm thinking of, is keeping extending possessions. Juwan Roberts had 15 points and 6 rebounds. 14 of those 15 points came in the first half. Big first half for him. Tramon Mark had 12 points and 7 rebounds. 10 of his 12 points came in the first half. So big first half out of Juwan Roberts and Tramon Mark to kind of keep Houston afloat there early. Jamal Shead had 14 points and 7 assists. I felt like if he'd wanted to and Sasser hadn't gotten hot, he probably would have gotten more like 10 assists, but they had to kind of feed the hot hand at some point. And then Marcus Sasser, 23 points on just 13 field goals. He was 7 of 12 from beyond the arc. His one non-3-point field goal was that nice fast break layup in which he used the rim as a deflection and finishes the right hand across the rim. I do want to point out that, we talked about how this Tulane team is good, and in Tulane's eyes, this was a fight for the number 1 seed in the American Athletic Conference, because if they had won this game, both teams would have been 5-1 in conference play, with them having the tiebreaker, having one head-to-head. Jalen Cook and Forbes, they both had big-time games. Forbes finished with 23 points, 4 of 11 from 3. I think he was hoping to get more like 5 or 6 of 11 from 3. He had a couple really good looks down the stretch that, when Houston was kind of extending their lead, might have kept it close a little bit longer. I was impressed with Cook on getting in the lane on the bounce. He went by Jamal Shead once or twice in a way that I didn't know point guards could do. I still think Jamal Shead's a tremendous defender. That guy is just very, very good. This Tulane team will surprise some folks in the American Athletic Conference play. I think they have an outside shot at the tournament as well. I think the American Athletic Conference will get 2 or 3 teams in if enough national spotlight gets brought onto the conference because of Houston, and they don't just talk about it as if Houston runs through it, because that's kind of what's happening right now. Early on, we saw the same kind of offense I thought yesterday in the preview was going to happen. Guards getting the lane and dropping it off to Juwan Roberts. Juwan Roberts, again, had 14 of his 15 points in the first half, and it's no accident. There were a lot of dunks, a lot of short-range middies, and then, frankly, defense rotated over slow, and he kind of put his right shoulder and finished his left hand over the top. Juwan Roberts was impactful early in those instances, because there was no size disadvantage at all. Big fella cross for Tulane did look like get dinged up at one point with his shoulder, and then one point I thought he broke his finger, but it might have just been dislocated. He tried to swat a block on the Jamal Shead almost dunk, and I guess he pinned it on the back, his hand on the backboard. Kind of funny. Hope he's okay. Get well soon if you're not. What I will say is it felt like that was there the entire game. If Houston went 4 out, 1 in, true 4 out, 1 in, penetrated and dropped it off. There were a couple times the pass was a little too hot, a little too much mustard, and the big would drop it. Or there's a couple times where like the guy would get in the lane and pump fake trying to get his own shot, whoever the guard was, and then the defense would rotate and you weren't able to drop it off. But in a quick succession of moves, that was there frequently and throughout the game. To try and cut it off, I thought Tulane went to a zone cleverly, except it still left the same lanes open. The difference in attacking angle there just came. They'd get the ball to the guy at the nail at the free throw line, Tramon Mark often, and he would be the guy getting those kinds of looks and actions. That's how he ended up getting his 10 points in the first half. Ron Hunter's offense. Ron Hunter's an impressive coach building a big program at Tulane. Again, the same guy that was IPY and built them up back when they had George Hill and those guys. Kind of mixed it up on Houston and kept it closer at the first half. Big moment in this game came at the end of the first half. Houston is up by 12. Tulane has the ball and is looking to like cut it to 10. 3 gets it to 9, whatever, right? And then right before half, Jalen Forbes does launch a 3 from like 28 feet, 27 feet away, and gets fouled by Tramon Mark, makes the 3, makes his free throw. The lid comes off the stadium. It's that kind of loud. And suddenly a 12-point lead and an 8-point lead at halftime. And, I think Houston had reason to doubt, like, oh, God, is this the night that we get upset on national television, ESPN Plus national television, I guess, or what's going to happen? Houston came in the second half, and the game plan was get the ball to Marcus. We'll talk more about him in the second segment, but ball got in Marcus's hands, continued to be in his hands a lot. Jalen Forbes, again, had a big, strong game, knocking down free throws, knocking down threes, putting the ball in the cup off the bounce. He did a lot of different things to Houston. Their offense was just 5 out. It was nothing crazy. Jalen Forbes just might be that good. And I wonder, is he the kind of guy that gets a pro shot one day or not? Does he end up doing a G League and moving up kind of deal? I don't think he'll be a name you forget, is all I'm saying. Impressive 6'4", 6'5" kid playing college basketball. There was a stretch second half where Houston just could not score. Between the 17-minute mark and the 12-minute mark. That's about a 5-minute stretch where Houston goes more or less without any real offensive flow or look, much less basket. Now, part of this is they were getting forced into long possessions on defense, which were both wearing them down and taking them out of transition offense. But also they kind of got stuck in the mud a little bit. And this is not the first time we've seen this happen. What's been encouraging is that outside of Alabama, it's really been mostly 5 or 6 minute chunks, and Houston's found a way to win anyway. Before we move on to the segment on Marcus Sasser, first, I need to point out that I think we now have evidence that Jarace Walker is working with Akeem Olajuwon. I somewhat joke, but he had a beautiful, put his back into a guy, fake his right shoulder, finish over his left shoulder, falling out of bounds on the left baseline, move, kind of in dagger point of the game. He also had a big dunk on a Reggie Chaney assist earlier in the half. Good second half out of him that kind of felt like nails, right? That kind of felt like nails in the coffin for Tulane. The biggest nails in the coffin were instituted by one Marcus Sasser. But before we get to that, I want to get to that in our next segment, we got to talk a little bit about betonline.net. Now, betonline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting info, stats, analysis, news, anything. The latest odds for every professional amateur league out there, from pro football to college basketball, whatever you want, they got it at betonline.net. If you have a sports podcast, they have those there as well. You can head to the line today. You use your mobile device to learn more. Betonline is where the game starts. Now, I understand why you're skittish. I see you shaking your head. I gave you some bad advice on Monday night's game between the Dallas Cowboys and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I thought Brady would keep it close. He didn't. I will say, though, as I look at this week's games, part of me thinks that the third time New York and Philadelphia play each other, it's either going to be a giant blowout or a very close game. The spread there is 7.5, with Philly being favored. I might say that New York keeps it closer than that because this is the third time those teams have played each other. And I wonder if there'll be something kind of in the air in that instance. I also look at the other NFC game this weekend and see that the Dallas Cowboys are underdogs by 3.5 points going to San Francisco. And I know it's on the road, right? I know it's on the road, but I will say I remember the playoff game last year where had they just run a shorter QB draw at the end with Dak Prescott, they might have had a better chance of putting through a field goal and like forcing him into overtime or taking a shot at the end zone and winning the football game. Instead, the QB draw took too long, and famously, clock management guru Mike McCarthy lost the game. But what I will say in a number of different ways is I think both those games might be closer than the spreads are, but maybe it's time to fade Parker. Who knows? But that's my recommendation. I'm saying to go with betonline.net to do it because betonline.net is where the game starts. All right, so in our second segment, I want to just ooh and ah and Marcus Sasser a little bit. So I said at halftime, Houston kind of dangerously 1.5 on the road in a hostile Tulane environment, up just 8 points after an exciting finish to the first half for Tulane. And they had to be feeling really good about it. Frankly, they had every right to be feeling good about it. They had the number one team in the country on the ropes in their home gym and were duking it out and did not look out of place at all. This is a team that just a couple seasons ago was having trouble giving tickets away, right? Is now in a sold-out gym competing with the number one team in the country. In their last time that they could see Houston come through because Houston's going to the Big 12 next year, right? And so on. I don't know what the halftime speech was. I did see in a post-game clip that Sasser said, the post-game talk was more or less to like, breathe, calm down, do what they do, etc. But then Sasser came out and had his own 8-0 run. He had a 3, a fast break 2, and a 3, all in succession, and a period that took the lead from 8 to 16 in kind of breathtaking fashion. I had that backwards ways, 3, fast break 2. But all of a sudden, he hits that fast break 2, and Tulane immediately calls timeout. Less than 2 minutes and a half, Ron Hunter's like, what are we doing, guys? Now, Ron Hunter was very complimentary of the Houston Cougars after the game. He said that Kelvin Sampson laid a blueprint of how to build a program from those doldrums to the American Conference when he got there to the number one team in the country, and he's trying to do the same thing in Tulane, and he feels like they're well on their way and right on the right trajectory. I'd argue that Tuesday night's game was indication of exactly that, but they don't have a Marcus Sasser yet. Very, very clear that I'm Marcus Sasser yet. It was not just the 8 points themselves, although extending the lead to 16 there was so crucial. It was the way he did it. You can read in the play-by-play, Marcus Sasser made 3-point jumper, assisted by Jamal Shed. Marcus Sasser made 3-point jumper, assisted by, I think the first one was Jarace Walker, right? Like, whatever. But when you start to watch the off-the-dribble stuff, the separation he creates on step backs, and the, pain he literally puts on defenses trying to figure out what they're going to do to keep him in front of them, it's just unreal. The announcers made a comment that made me think, they said something along the lines of Marcus Sasser has a step back as lethal as another guy who made a living playing basketball in Houston, alluding to James Harden. And I understand that that's the natural comparison that's on the step back. And obviously Harden's an MVP and will have his number retired in Toyota and whatnot, right? But the difference to me with Sasser is, obviously Sasser's defense. He's one of the best defense players in the country and will be a great two-way pro. But also, Sasser wants the contact initially in a way that is just fascinating to me. And then his step back is not like a jump step. His step back is legitimately just long steps. He has really, really long strides, and he's never, because it's not a jump, he's never out of balance, never off kilter, never anything. It's really, really fascinating to see happen because most tremendous step back shooters are really jumping. And I don't mean to say that they're traveling. I'm not that guy. They're really jumping. And his step back is truly a long step backwards. It's a pro caliber move. And I tweeted out, and I believe it, I think he's going to have, when he enters the NBA, assuming the shooting continues to translate, because sometimes, it takes a little time, but he will very quickly have, a top 20 step back in the NBA. And I don't mean that to say like he'll be a top 20 scorer in the NBA. Obviously, a score in the NBA takes a lot of other things too. You got to have a lot of counters and frankly, a step back is just a counter. But very, very quickly, his step back will be as lethal a move as anyone's in pro basketball. And I think that's going to be tremendous to see because right now it's projected in a mid to late first round. I'm seeing the stuff as high as 17. I'm seeing stuff as low as 22. I think I saw one thing that said 24, 25. That is to say, he'll be on a playoff team. Like those are teams that are in the NBA playoffs, and he'll have a great chance coming to make a direct impact because of that kind of a move. Because everything stems off of once he's hit that once or twice, the defense will overreact once. He can keep going by them. The defense will overreact the second time. He can give and go and get behind the back door on somebody. The defense will start treating it differently. He's probably a sixth man coming in because beyond one of those playoff teams, and he's a 6'2", 6'3" guard or whatever. But it is tremendous to see that is such a pro caliber move. Now, I also think what's interesting here is that like he was the star of the show in every sense. Sampson mentioned that Marcus Sasser is more than anyone is a winner. He's been putting in a lot of time. I got in him a little bit in the first half. They were backing off of Marcus, and Marcus was passing it, and Sampson just said to shoot it. Right? That was a big, apparently, halftime thing that came out, and he was shooting the basketball. Apparently, before the game, Sampson didn't say when before the game, but before the game, he told him, this was a night where you might need to make 5 or 6 threes, Marcus. Marcus ended up making 7 out of 12. Right? Like, okay, that's how that goes. Marcus did make 5 threes in the second half along, Houston eventually outscored Tulane 40-28. I think the fascinating thing here is that Marcus has not had a bad game this year. Marcus had bad shooting games this year. But Sampson was quick to tell us that, like, Marcus has always been their best player in every game they've played this season, even when he is shooting the ball badly. In fact, to quote Sampson, he said, "Don't confuse shooting poorly with playing bad. A lot of times you don't make shots, but you're playing great." Marcus always plays really good, but he hadn't shot the ball well until recently. Nobody puts more time in than Marcus. Now, I think what's interesting there is that, like, early in the season, there was a complaint, Marcus is getting 6 or 7 shots. Marcus shooting a low percentage from 3 early on. He was still finding his spots. He was finding how to play with Jarace, finding how to play in the rotation with Sharp and Arsenault and those guys who got to see the floor some tonight, Tuesday night. I'm recording after the game Tuesday night. But fascinatingly enough, as his 3-point shot has come on, it's led to no drop in his defense. He's frequently covering the other team's best player or best guard for sure. And B, he doesn't feel like he's taking different shots. And I think Sampson's spot on when he says that it's the exact same game. They're just going in now. And part of that is it's in conference play, and Sasser's a gamer. He understands these games count a lot. Did the Virginia game count a lot? Yes. Did the Oregon game count a lot? St. Mary's game count a lot? Yes. All of them, yes. But at the end of the day, if they win this conference, they're in a tournament. And if they're in the tournament, they get a top seed or whatever because they're doing well all year, right? Those things matter. These games matter in a different way to Sass. And frankly, we know from hearing all kinds of college coaches talk about scouting reports and get to conference play that they are harder to win because they have more tape on you and those kinds of things, right? Sasser's play was tremendous. I cannot go on and on enough about it. It's just awesome to see we had QG. Grimes came through and was great, a pro guard. I didn't feel like it felt like this. So I guess in the comments, tell me, like, did it feel like this to you? Because I feel like Sasser's, and maybe it's because he's playing his whole college career out in a way that I don't think he necessarily had to, although I'm very appreciative, Marcus. Thank you. He's the best player for every time he steps on. And on the floor with the pros, Jarace Walker's a pro, right? When they play Cincinnati has a pro wing. When they play Central Florida has a pro forward. Doesn't matter. Sasser's the best player on the floor every single night, and it's fascinating to watch. And frankly, it's a pleasure and a joy to see him go on those stretches where he's just like, I'm not losing tonight, right? That 8 points coming out at halftime, he said, guys, we're not losing tonight. That's not happening. There was other moments where, like, he was kind of feeling it, and, like, he'd start the offense, he'd pass it, they'd all be running around, and they run a fairly simple motion offense and, like, whatever. And he'd get it back, like, okay, y'all got it back to me? Okay, my turn. And it would go, right? He'd a charge forward, step back, poof, 3. And it was just like those kinds of moments are where he's just working the game like a puppet master in a way that's just so cool. Speaking of puppet masters, some puppet master must have been in charge of college basketball on Tuesday night. So in our next segment, let's talk a little bit about how that happened and what went down in college basketball on Tuesday. So if we're going to talk about what happened in college basketball on Tuesday, not just because we're going to the Big 12 next season, but I do think we need to start with the Big 12 because Houston, I think rightly, has kind of been like fending off teams from their number one ranking. Kansas felt like they had a shot at it, but Houston took it, right? Instead, on Tuesday night, Kansas lost a overtime game to cross-state rival Kansas State, 83-82. The game finished on finished on a lob for the go-ahead points. And then this, came down, missed a shot in the storm. The crowd just stormed the court. Really, really cool coaching speech after the game in which Jerome Tang, first of all, if you don't know the story of Jerome Tang, Trinidad coach, comes to States, is coaching Cat basketball. Cool story. Coaching at Kansas State, building that program up. They're top 25 right now. I think they're 14 going into that Kansas game. They'll probably be top 10 next week with a win over Kansas, right? But knocks off Kansas. That helps us. So he's on our team right now until he gets too close, and then we'll have to fight him off too. But his post-game speech and afterwards, he's on the floor. The crowd is emptied out onto the basketball court, and he's got, I don't know if it's a megaphone or microphone or what, but he's thanking the crowd, thanking the student section, talking about very, very friendly and familiar with them, and a very, very cool moment for a program that's kind of going through a rebuild, similar to Houston went to, not that long ago. They're a Power 5 conference, so it looks a little different, but Kansas State feels kind of similar to what Houston felt like a while back. Had good players in the past, but hadn't really put it together, right? Like, did Michael Beasley come through? Yeah. They didn't win a whole lot of games with them, right? And so that's on the one side. On the other, you also had UT Austin fall to Iowa State, in which was a closer game, and I guess UT Austin was on the road, but UT Austin lost to Iowa State 78-67. While Kansas State was close, that one was really never close. Now, I also know that, as I'm recording this, it looks like Baylor's going to hold on to beat Texas Tech. They're up by 10. Something's going on with Tech. Tech started off the season ranked fairly high. Mark Adams, I thought, kind of had it rolling there. And he's currently 0-5, about to be 0-6 in conference. I don't know. I thought that program was really strong and defensive focused, and it was really interesting basketball to watch. Not so much. But that's kind of where the top 25 stuff goes for Houston's sake. On Tuesday night, Alabama beat Vanderbilt by 12. Vanderbilt, again, I mentioned in the comments of the last video, Vanderbilt beat Arkansas, not Tennessee. But either way, Vanderbilt has the ability to knock off top teams, so pay attention to them. Tennessee beat Mississippi State, and so that's another top 10 team in action on Tuesday night. And so really the separation thing for Houston is that they kind of pushed Kansas back down the totem pole, watching them lose to Kansas State. As far as other top whatever matchups go tonight, as you're listening to this on a Wednesday, Xavier DePaul is a fun rivalry game in Chicago. Xavier's number 8 in the country, so and then Virginia Tech is another fun rivalry game at 6 o'clock. Virginia's number 10 in the country. Obviously, even if they started climbing, I'd feel fairly safe as Houston did beat them directly. But, and then UConn kind of fell off a map. But if you care about the Huskies, they're a 4-loss team, but they're back at 15 and they're playing on Wednesday night as well. On Tuesday, number 3, Purdue is back in action. Purdue is going to look to make some noise against Minnesota. Frankly, they're going to probably try and run that score up to be more than the 20-point win Houston just had, because at number 3, they're hoping if they can have a more impressive series of wins this week with Kansas losing, can they jump up back to number 1 or whatever, right? And then somewhere back there is Gonzaga. Gonzaga plays Northern Marymount on Thursday. I actually don't know if they play anyone over the weekend. But anyway, Gonzaga is going to have the same problem Houston's going to run into, where they're going to be well-coached, good college basketball teams in a smaller conference and not get the respect for it. Like, I think Houston deserves some respect for what they just did to Tulane. Tulane, like I've said a couple times in the course of this podcast, is a good basketball team and is a program in the right direction. However, nationally, they're not going to get called that. They're a cool team with cool colors, and like they won a cool bowl game. That's about what the nation thinks of them. And so I don't think that's fair, but I think that's what the talk is. Speaking of what the talk is, you can find me on Twitter to get more Cougs talk. Find me at Painsworth 512, PAINSWORTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Be Real, whatever you want to talk. I can talk all things Cougs, football, basketball. We can talk the Rockets. Really explosive interview with John Wall came out yesterday. If you're listening to us Wednesday, they came out on Tuesday. The Astros. We can talk the Texans. We talk whatever you like. I like talking sneakers and hip hop and those kind of things as well. So make sure you find me at Painsworth 512 to talk all things Cougs. Thank you so much for making us your first listen today. If you're looking for a second listen of the day, can I recommend Locked On College Basketball one more time? Locked On College Basketball is a great listen. Andy and Isaac do a great job of breaking down all things college hoops. And frankly, there's some chaos on Tuesday night. Kansas fell. That's going to be important and a fun episode. So make sure you go check them out at Locked On College Basketball for your second listen of the day. Thank you all so much. Make sure you listen, subscribe down below. Listen to us every day. Locked On Cougs, proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That's your team. In our case, the number one team in the country. Every day. Go Cougs.